Okay, now we discuss the little known history of Celtic warriors in Egypt. Many people are unaware that there ever was a time when Celtic warriors weren't perhaps up in Britain, but history shows something quite different than that. Here you can see a couple of Celtic warriors here on a ship and one looking back towards other ships. You can see they're on these high prowed ships that we keep talking about that led all the way through the Phoenicians, Sumerians to start it with, and Egyptians and stuff, and they all had these proud boats that had the points on the front of them. This one with a skull onto it here, and also back here in the back. But there were a lot of them that were carved in that showed dragons and other creatures on the front of the prows. Here we are in front of the famous Egyptian temple here, and you can see people that are out in the water just on small float skiffs made of bundles of reeds also. Kind of an interesting photo here. They even show how the wood is put together without using the extra stays, but actually tied together, and how the wood is put together in the Egyptian solar boat that they found near Khufu's pyramid, and how it is put together in that same way, and it's held together with ropes and beveled wood, and it's all made. It is one exacting thing. It's kind of neat to even just look into that aspect of it. But let's explore these little known histories of Celtic warriors in Egypt. Celtic warriors were once one of the most important supports of Mediterranean armies. However, it's little known than the fact that apart from their role in the Byzantium, these powerful warriors also had strong connections with Egypt. Nowadays, the Celtic languages and cultures are restricted to Ireland, parts of Scotland, Wales, Galicia in Spain, and Brittany in France. However, Celtic-speaking tribes once controlled much of Europe before the rise of the Roman Empire. Groups of Celtic mercenaries and adventurers made their presence felt as far afield as Thrace, Greece, the land of Judea, and even into Africa. It was during the 4th century BC that Celtic warriors first appeared in Greece, Italy, and Mediterranean islands. In 390 BC, they sacked a small city along the Tiber River in Etruria. Celtic warriors were famous for their quality of their weapons, their impressive courage, and their wild battle cries. Some of them went on foot, but the nobles rode to battle on horses, and they were long hair and favored decorated shields and long swords. During the 4th and beginning of the 3rd centuries BC, they were employed in the region from Sparta to Syracuse. They were formed an important part of the Carthaginian army and fought in both Punic Wars. They supported Hannibal and traveled with him through the Alps. It's rarely reported that during the 3rd century BC, the Celts also acted as support for the Ptolemaic Dynasties in Egypt. Many Celts in the armies of foreign countries came from Galatia, an area once situated in the highlands of central Anatolia, what is now Turkey. From the early 3rd century, Celtic warriors from the Eastern European tribes were included in the Egyptian battle order. During the reign of Ptolemy II, Philadelphios, a band of 4,000 Celtic warriors were recruited from the Balkans with the aid of Antigonus Gonatas of Macedon. According to the Greek historian Pausanias, the 4,000 Celtic warriors helped Ptolemy to win a crushing victory over his half-brother usurper, Ptolemaic Kyranos. He also claims that the war leaders of the Celtic bands wanted to overthrow Ptolemy and Magus of Cyrene, a Greek Macedonian nobleman who was a member of the Ptolemaic dynasty. Their goal was to set themselves up as rulers of Egypt. To punish this Celtic rebellion, Ptolemy expelled those exotic warriors to a small island in the Nile to die of starvation. However, this episode did not mean the end of the association between the Celts and the Ptolemies. In 250 BC, Ptolemy II hired more Celtic warriors to assist the native Egyptian army in road construction and to put down rebellions. He and his son Ptolemy III, Euergetes, who became pharaoh in 247 BC, also employed Celtic mercenaries. This time they marched through Syria and Judea in a victorious campaign against Seleucus Kallikinos, a ruler of the Hellenistic Seleucid Empire. In the invasion of the Seleucid Empire, ravaging Mesopotamian and western Persia. During the reign of Ptolemy IV, Philopator, or the Love Father, 222 to 205 BC, Celtic soldiers had become a part of the culture of Ptolemaic Egypt. Until the fall of the Ptolemaic Dynasty, they remained a very important part of the army. Ptolemy V Epiphanes hired an army of Thracian Celts to put down a revolt of the native Egyptian population in Upper Egypt. It's also known that the last ruler of the dynasty, Cleopatra, used these Celtic mercenaries. Many Celtic warriors found a new home in Egypt, married local women, and stayed in the land of the pharaohs for the remainder of their lives. According to the Greek historian Polybios, the intermarriage between Celtic warriors and native Egyptian Greek girls were very common. The children of the Celtic Egyptian marriages were known by the slang term pidgovoi. And here we can see Celts in Egypt, perhaps at the time of the Hannibal Wars, and you can see them leading into these concepts and ideas. The oldest footsteps between the two civilizations. According to Lorraine Evans, who reveals in her compelling book Kingdom of the Ark, the relationship between Egypt and the Celts is much older than the 3rd century BC. She believes that the remains of an ancient boat discovered in 1937 near North Ferriby, Yorkshire, belonged to ancient Egyptians. It's an Egyptian boat. The boat was at first thought to be a Viking longship, but according to radiocarbon dating, it was created around 1400 1350 BC. And this shows you the correlation of how you could look at these boats and somebody might think they're a longboat, but yet that's Egyptian. Evans argues that these boats originated from Egypt. In the Scotta Chronicon, a 15th century chronicle of the legendary account by the Scottish historian Walter Bower, Evans discovered the story of Scotta, the Egyptian princess and daughter of a pharaoh, believed to be Akenatens, who fled from Egypt with her husband Gayethos. They settled in Scotland until they were forced to leave and landed in Ireland. The Egyptian names used in Bower's manuscripts come from Manetho's work. According to the text, Scotta's father was Anechres, what is a Greek version of the name Akenatens. Evans believes that the legendary Scotta would be the daughter of the heretic king from Egypt, and Scotia is the name for Scotland, and it means little flower. And here's that longboat that they're digging out here, and that they thought was a longboat. Bronze Age excavation. Another link between the history of the Egyptians and the Celts comes from before the period known in Egyptology as the New Kingdom of 1640 to 1550 BC. In 1955, archaeologist Dr. Sean O'Riordan of Trinity College Dublin made an interesting discovery during an excavation of the mound of hostages at Tara in Ireland. The site dated to the Bronze Age. It was connected with the history of the ancient kingship of Ireland. Archaeologists discovered the skeletal remains of what is believed to have been a young prince. The most interesting aspect of this finding was a rare necklace of Fayette beads, made from a paste of minerals and plant extracts that had been fired. They were Egyptian, and the skeleton was carbon dated to around 1350 BC. The boy from Tara lived in the same times as Tutankhamun. Even more surprising is the fact that both Tutankhamun and Terra skeleton had the same golden collar around the neck, which was inlaid with matching conical blue-green faience beads. And I've shown you in one of my recent videos that they find this exact same faience beads all the way up into Denmark and so on, that there was ancient trades from back then. This is that mound that they had gone into there, called the Mound of Hostages. It's really like a Kurgan type burial. There are still many mysteries behind the Celtic-Egyptian connection. In Egypt, archaeologists have found many figurines of Celts presented in Ptolemaic style. Due to a lack of resources, this area of research remains largely unexplored. Only future excavation expeditions may find an answer to questions surrounding the full history of the Celtic connections in Egypt. So there's quite a few connections with the northern Gauls and these people, these Celtic warriors. They're primarily drawn a lot of times in this strange style that's here, and people that would go into battle wearing shields and warrior, but others that would come just naked like crazy and run into fights. But it's believed that the people that ran in naked like crazy, known as the berserkers, were not impinging themselves with the heavy weight of armor and were just willing to go at it full hog. They also probably did not afford the armor that they had before, but they did afford a good weapon. Anyhow, guys, like, share, and subscribe, but I just thought I'd share this with you. It's another showing of things that people really didn't have thoughts of, and to this day, most people don't think of the connections that the ancient Celts did have with all of the people of the Levant, through and even into Africa up into Egypt. Connections even to the Punic Wars. Connections to a lot of things that people don't want to allow connections to that had happened in ancient times, but after the Roman capture and destruction of a lot of what Celtic lands were, that kind of got mulled over and is really not spoke about.